NATO is really at the heart of American power around the world, and I would argue American domination of the rest of the world against the will of the vast majority of the people. In the words of the Occupy movement, it's the 1% dominating the 99%. Eric Zorn in a Chicago Tribune column asked me to sort of bullet point why oppose NATO, and writing very late at night in an email, I bulleted point down to a few different things. What are our demands of NATO? What are our demands of President Obama? The first one I would list as troops out now. United States troops, whether under NATO guise or not, are now in 130 countries around the world. The vast majority of the peoples in those countries, including places like Afghanistan, are opposed to the United States presence. The second bullet point I would add is to why to oppose NATO would be to stop, insist that it stop threatening war on other nations. The third bullet point I would say is to why to oppose NATO is to insist that the United States and its allies stop supporting human rights abusing regimes. I talked a little bit about Israel, which, for those who don't know it, routinely imprisons without charge thousands of Palestinians, continues to dispossess the Palestinian people of their lands, takes upon itself to assassinate people, both within the territories as well as in other countries abroad. You have Saudi Arabia, another U.S.-backed dictatorship, which is basically responsible for every single one of the human rights abuses that are routinely charged against Iran. And don't get me wrong, Iran is a horrible place to be if you're a national minority or if you're a gay person or what have you. But all the same things could be said about Saudi Arabia. And you can go on and on. You had the U.S. support of the coup d'etat in Honduras, for example. The coup d'etat that just happened in the Indian Ocean nation was, keep on wanting to say it's the Seychelles. Help me out, come on, international experts. The coup d'etat that just happened.
Mali?
No. The Maldives. Maldives, yeah. Mali also, but we don't know about that. But the Maldives, the United States clearly supported the coup that just happened there. And so you have all the justifications used for attacking Iran, for example, or attacking North Korea, or attacking Syria, or attacking Libya, that could be used for invading any number of U.S. allies. But of course, the United States does not talk about invading Saudi Arabia. It keeps on funneling arms to Saudi Arabia and Israel and any number of other places that have got nasty human rights records. So, bullet point number 4. Make a huge, huge cut. I mean, a dramatic cut in U.S. military spending. I just noted that U.S. military spending equals the rest of the world combined. The NATO countries put together equal 70% of world military spending. That isn't spending at the level of important military power or great military power. That is spending at the level of empire. I mean, this is the world's largest ever, most expansive, most dominating empire in history. That's what NATO really represents, especially when you consider the fact that the United States occupies all these countries against the express will of most of the people that live in them. And the last reason why people, in terms of, shall we say, political reason or an ideological reason or a moral reason why you should oppose NATO is this, that the attacks on civil liberties that we have seen in this country are part and parcel of the growth of empire, we argue. It is no accident that as the United States has increasingly tried to dominate the world militarily, that has had a directly corrosive effect on democracy here in the United States. Some of the things that are being pushed by President Obama, frankly, were only the wildest fantasies of people like George W. Bush. I'm talking about the ability to unilaterally assassinate people abroad, play literally judge, jury, and executioner. I'm talking about things like the National Defense Authorization Act, which did away with habeas corpus. In other words, you can be arrested, held without charge indefinitely. And the way I've described it to people, we're not just fighting to regain 20th century or 19th century or even 18th century rights that were won by generations many before us. We're talking about trying to win back rights that were won in the 13th century. We're talking Magna Carta here, 1215, habeas corpus. That's how low we have sunk in terms of the depths of attacks on civil liberties. And any number of you, I'm sure, could talk more about this yourselves, about the frightful attacks on personal privacy, the fact that corporations, the government can snoop on you, commit blatantly illegal acts, and those are signed off by the courts and the federal government. And I would argue that this is a direct corollary to the growth of empire, the growth of militarism. And this country has seen this pattern before. We saw it during World War I. We saw it during World War II. We saw it as recently as the Vietnam War era, where many of you who are older have read the history books will remember there were programs such as COINTELPRO, where people would be doing peaceful activity, would be routinely infiltrated by their government, and dirty tricks would be played on them. In the case of the Black Panther Party, people literally assassinated by the government. And this was all par for the course in the late 1960s and early 1970s. And in the run-up, of course, to the NATO Summit in Chicago, there's been a lot of reference back to 1968. And I think with good reason in many respects, because the kind of attacks that you saw on civil liberties in that day, the so-called police riot, in the words of the Kerner Commission, were a direct result of fighting an unjust war abroad. There's a reason why the Rahm Emanuels and the Barack Obamas do not like civil liberties, do not like the First Amendment in the streets of Chicago during the NATO Summit. It has everything to do with the fact that if we get a good hearing for our views about why you should oppose the wars, why you should oppose NATO, why you should oppose G8, then it'll become increasingly difficult for them to pursue their policies that are pro-war, that are pro the 1% in so many respects. And then that's why, for those who have perhaps been following our battle to win permits for protests against the NATO Summit, why we've had to jump through these ridiculous hoops just to exercise the First Amendment, something that should not require a permit.